This is the Making Noise podcast.
So there's a really great podcast called Blank Check, where they talk about that. They talk about directors who have enormous success early in their careers, and basically from that point forward, they can make whatever passion projects they want to for the rest of their lives. Like, no matter how good or how bad their movies are from that point forward, they will always be greenlit on projects, even if they haven't had a successful movie in 30 years, because Hollywood will always be like, well, but this is the person who gave us X,
Right.
They had this magic. And Tim Burton is absolutely one of those cases, you know. It's like he has Pee-wee's Big Adventure and then Beetlejuice and then Batman 1989, which just blew things wide open.
I have that mask too.
Oh, hell yeah, you do. And then Edward Scissorhands, and it's like, this cat can do no wrong. Like, he's coming up with all these bizarre stories. Everybody's buying into it. And then he does Batman Returns, and the people are like, okay. And then does Ed Wood, and then folks are like, okay, really, Tim, what are you up to? And then he gets to this point where he just like remakes other people's properties for the next 20 years. Like, that's how he ends up doing shit like Alice in Wonderland for Disney, and he does the remake of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and he does, right? So yeah, it's kind of fascinating when you take a look at composers who have big success early on. You know, I talk about that with some of my students a lot, where you take a look at Stravinsky, you know, where he has this incredible run of these early ballets. You do the Firebird, boom. You do Petrushka, boom. You do Rite of Spring, boom. And then does Les Noces right after it, which is like Rite of Spring Part 2, you know, but still hip. And then, you know, what do you do after that? And it's like, well, here's his octet.
Right.
which is an incredible piece, right? But like, you have to push yourself into a completely different direction, I think, you know, when you have that young early success. And you know, it's always fascinating to me to see people who have success pretty early in their career. And it's funny because, you know, we all sit around, we're like, oh goody, wouldn't that have been great, or wouldn't that be great if I were to get that? And I'm like, I don't know. That could be an awful lot of pressure. You know? I mean, I don't know her, but you know, you think about Caroline Shaw. Partita is just such a phenomenal composition. It wins the Pulitzer, blows everybody's minds.
Grammys.
Right. And I'm like, oh, Caroline. Like, holy cow. You know, this brilliant woman, you know, what's the next step? You know, and that's wild, you know. And you know, I think about Kendrick, you know, it's like, what's the next step? What do you do after that? You know, what I think about, you know, I think about people like, you know, digging back a little bit, but Shostakovich was 19 when he wrote his first symphony, and it was performed internationally. Like, what do you do after that? That's so, that puts just enormous pressure on you as a young artist. Yeah, that's wild.
It's an interesting thing, man. It makes me think of like child actors and I don't know, like Justin Bieber, for example.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Right.
like that dude hit success immediately at like 15, 16, you know?
Yeah.
Or like the prime example of 20th century, Michael Jackson.
Right.
But
yeah, my hot take on Michael Jackson, I was just talking about Michael Jackson today, actually, in one of my classes, is that my hot take is that incredible run in the 1980s when Michael Jackson went from Michael Jackson, member of the Jackson 5, to the King of Pop, has more to do with Quincy Jones.
Oh, totally.
Than Michael Jackson, right?
Totally.
Like those 3 albums, Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad. I'm like, come on. I mean, look, no doubt, Michael Jackson, a talent that is once in a generation. But to me, truly, the talent that's a once in a century behind those 3 albums, that's Quincy Jones.
Well, that's the thing about Michael Jackson is he isn't even an example of what we're talking about because he wasn't the one creating it. He was the one performing it.
He was the one executing it, right?
Exactly. Right. Quincy Jones was the creator, the brains behind it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Exactly, so I mean, but
man, you want to talk about a cat who had a career?
Yeah.
Who still has a career? He's still going. That cat's like 147.
Yeah, he's old, man. He's
probably working on wife 19.
Yeah, he gotta be.
You know, he's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like 87. Might be time to have another kid. Ha ha ha. And I'm like, what are you doing, Quincy? He's like, yeah, I just got back talking with, it's wild, man. Quincy Jones. Have you watched that? Have you watched that documentary on Netflix just called Quincy?
Yeah, the one that Rashida made.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. That is just remarkable.
It's a powerful documentary.
It is. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times and I tear up multiple times during it. Just watching a human being operating at that creative level. And also somebody, who is self-aware enough to acknowledge his personal shortcomings. That's something that's really powerful about that. He makes no bones about the fact, where he talks about, this marriage I messed that up. That was on me. And, I don't have a great relationship with X and Y and Z of my kids because I wasn't there, and that's, that takes a bit of courage in a major documentary to fess up to that. And that's tough, but he does it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's something that I definitely walked away from as well, especially during the period of his life where he was having what was it, like heart issues or something like that, and he got really into yoga.
He had that I think it was a stroke or something like that, where they had to basically do brain surgery.
Right.
And that was the end of his trumpet playing career too.
That's something you can't handle.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Yeah. All of a sudden you wake up one day and you're no longer a performer. That's tough. But when you're Quincy Jones, he's like, oh, well, forget about it. I'll just write 20 film scores now.
Yeah, exactly. Let me write Thriller.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just gonna, produce 3 of the biggest selling albums of all time in a single decade. And in the middle of all that, We Are the World, right? He was producer.
Yeah, that's right.
He was producer on that. Like, we laugh at that tune now, but like that was one of the best selling singles of all time, right?
Was it really?
I think at the time it was the biggest selling single of all time, and it raised a ton of money. He was like, only Quincy Jones could get that crazy talent pool in the same room at the same time, right? That was Quincy. Of course it was Quincy, right?